Welcome to Edge of Intelligence, where we explore how strategy, systems, and smart tech converge. I'm Carl Owen, your host and fractional CIO, also an advisor, AI advisor at Protelligent. Many of my clients in finance and tech ask, how do you trust the numbers behind forecasts and models? That's exactly why our guest today is such a fascinating person. David Traynor is founder and CEO of New Constructs, a firm that uses machine learning, natural language processing, and deep accounting insights to uncover hidden distortions in financial statements. Their RoboAnalyst technology analyzes MD&A, footnotes, SEC filings, and corporate actions to surface true economic performance. David, thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, Carl. Thank you for having me.
Sure. To start, can you take us back to the spark? When did the idea for New Constructs really take shape with you, and what gaps in financial research and valuation theory did you see that your firm would correct?
I can remember the exact moment. I had just joined Credit Suisse and had one meeting or two with my boss, and his initial directive was go read these books. And then when I said I'd read them, he said, read them again. But there was an appendix in one of the books it's a book called Creating Shareholder Value, written by Al Rappaport. And I remember in the appendix to one of the chapters, he talked about what we really need to have here is a database for all the accounting data that normalizes all the different things that companies do so that they can't goose the numbers. They can't use different accounting rules to show different things. And really, we just need something that makes it all apples to apples. And I thought, well, yeah, of course we do. I mean, we don't. And so that's where the spark was born. I joined Wall Street, and from there, I read the books, read what Al Rappaport had to say, and then saw exactly how that was not being done on Wall Street.
Interesting. Many firms claim to use AI or quant models, but your strength is combining deep accounting insight with automation. That blend gives you both domain credibility and technical rigor. I want to dig into how New Constructs positions that edge. How do you describe the mission of New Constructs today, and how has it evolved from your early days?
The mission hasn't changed, Carl. The mission, from that moment, really, when I started at Credit Suisse, my job then was to build better models to better express profitability, which would help you better understand valuation, and to work through all of the accounting shenanigans and accounting complexities that cloud the picture. And really, with the New Constructs, the real difference is that we're doing that with technology. It's been the mission, I feel like, of a lot of the sort of investing greats to pontificate about how it's important to do this kind of work. But of course, they're not doing it for anybody else but themselves. They talk about, well, this is how you make a lot of money, but it's sort of like, I like to joke, it's sort of like Tom Brady saying, well, this is how you should throw a pass in a football game. It's easy for him to tell you how to do that and talk about it. It's a whole lot harder to do.
Right.
And the same is true with building the database. And our mission has always been to improve the integrity of the capital markets. I remember when I first wrote my business plan, this was early days of 2002, and that was the title, New Constructs, improving the integrity of the capital markets. And that's what we've always been about, and that's what I think is one of the best things that a person can do in modern society is help the capital allocation system be more efficient, to be more accurate, because it's the capital allocation system that has separated the United States from the rest of the world, that's given us our edge. It's our ability to do more with less. It's our ability to allocate capital to its highest and best use. It goes hand in hand really with the freedom of speech and freedom of ideas. As long as we are able to allow ideas organically or based on merit, right, to succeed, that's sort of what a liberal democratic society does. Then we have a free and productive society, one that grows and evolves. All the same is true for the money side too, right? A free and efficient market is going to allocate capital to the best ideas, right? To the places that need it the most. And tuning that to be better and better, I think, increases standards of living for us here in America and for everyone in the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. You often talk about reversing accounting distortions. Can you walk us through how that works in practice?
Yeah, I mean, it really just requires doing some really boring, difficult, complex work. I remember when I first took accounting classes, there was a buddy of mine that I played on the football team with, and he was just a whiz in accounting. And I was like, man, I don't like this stuff that much. Uh, but once I took a finance class and learned that accounting is really the vocabulary of finance, and that you need to understand that vocabulary if you ever really want to speak the language. I was fascinated. And the accounting is not just what you see in the financial statements, it's what you see in the footnotes and the management discussion and analysis. And so, Carl, reversing accounting distortion means understanding that there's a difference between accounting results and the underlying economics of a business. See, accounting is not really designed to represent the underlying economics of the business. Accounting is meant to count, right? Just like the word sounds, accounting. You create accounts, you count stuff. But just like notes or notes in a musical product, or words in a book by themselves don't have any meaning. It's how you put them together. The same is true for the accounting data. And that's where we get the accounting data to express the underlying economics. Companies can do things on their income statement and balance sheet and cash flow statement that make those statements not representative of the underlying economics. And so what you have to do is gather all the data from all the statements, because they give you clues about each other, and then the footnotes. And that goes into a larger data set that can then be used to properly represent the economics of the business. It's like you can't have a symphony without all the notes. And so you can't have a good understanding of a company without all the footnotes.
I see. That makes perfect sense. What is the architecture behind your RoboAnalyst? I mean, how does machine learning, natural language processing, rule engines, human validation, how does all that interact?
It's not like some super fancy, crazy technology. It's really the product of a lot of hard work, Carl. So when I started New Constructs, we got our first funding in 2003, and the first thing we built, very first thing, was a system for collecting data out of filings. And what that system did really was just an application that combined the actual filing, its original form, the database, and a data collection tool, so that when we collected things out of the filing, it went straight in the database, and the database would always connect back to the filing. And that's a big part of how our systems remain 100% auditable and transparent, which is the reason why some of the biggest firms in the world work with us, because everything we do can be audited back to the source. But what I really set up in that process was a lot of sort of basic rules that I had learned from going through thousands of filings manually. And I saw that there were patterns. There were some things that were pretty easy to get from every filing. There were some things that were really hard. The key is to get the machines to take care of as much of the easy things as possible, so you save the human's attention for the hard stuff. Because I saw firsthand on Wall Street, as soon as people could get out of reading filings, they were out of there. So I was at Credit Suisse before the tech bubble. And before the tech bubble, people cared about doing real work and reading filings. But when the tech bubble hit, because I was there before, during, and after, the tech bubble hit, those tech analysts, they couldn't give two squats. I mean, they didn't care about it at all. In fact, they would tell me it was a waste of their time to even talk about a balance sheet, because they were trying to write a report for a big IPO, and nobody cared about the underlying economics during the tech bubble, because it didn't matter to the narrative. So the answer in terms of the architectures, it started with this very simple system that was written in Java. And a lot of it's still in Java. Like, our systems aren't that advanced. But what we have that is advanced is a history of every parsed item through over 200,000 filings. Every time an expert went through a file and they marked it up, they said, this item in this text means this, and it goes into the database. And the database architecture, the taxonomy, is directly linked to our ontology. The ontology is the meaning for the data, and the taxonomy supports that. So when we classify the data in a particular way, that's a human expert saying it means this. We collect around 16 other characteristics, at minimum 16 other characteristics about that data point at the same time. And that feeds rules engines and natural language processing and some basic machine learning tools to get the machine to start to collect the data more and more on its own. The idea is always that I always like to say, look, when you see cost of goods sold in the same place, in the same income statement for one company, 100, or several companies, 1,000 times out of 1,000 times, you don't need a human to do that anymore. The machine can do it.
Right.
So really our biggest asset is all the intelligence that goes into classifying the data, classifying the raw accounting data according to its economic consequence or meaning, and building that in a database and tracking it hundreds of thousands of times so that the machine can come through and replicate.
Gotcha. That kind of feeds into my next question. In a world full of data providers, what makes new constructs stand out? Is it transparency, methodology, coverage, something else?
It's not coverage. We only cover, around 3,500 companies in the US. No, it's transparency, it's the methodology, and it's the accuracy. And then most importantly, it's the alpha, Carl. Like the indices that are based on our data, and the ETF based on our data are dramatically outperforming the S&P 500. So that's special. That's like the data is not just different, it's better. And the way you measure better in the stock market business is, does it produce more alpha? And the answer is it does.
Well, when I talk to my clients about applying AI, the hardest part is often not the model, but the plumbing behind it. So data ingestion, consistency, interoperability, interpretability, auditability, so given your domain, I suspect you've addressed those challenges head on. Let's kind of peel that back a little bit.
Yeah, 1000%. I mean, it's all about the data. And we recently wrote an article you're welcome to share with the audience. I can give you the link if I haven't already, called Thinking Small Drives Big Leaps in AI. And really what it says is that this whole idea that you can pour the internet into a large language model and it's going to suddenly understand the world is incredibly naive. And we now know it to not be true. So, what do you take away from that? What does that mean? For me, it means take a step back and say, look, there is no large data set, or there's no model that's going to figure out the world. But if we can narrow it down to a domain where we can structure the data and apply expert rules that we know to provide truly correct and accurate results or deterministic outcomes, then we got something special. Well, it turns out there's a term for that. It's called a small language model, right? And large language model is really kind of euphemism for whole language model, right? Because it's like,
Right.
oh, we're just going to put the internet in there, and all of a sudden ChatGPT is going to figure everything out, right? It's like, oh, ChatGPT is God because the internet's reliable. I'm like, come on, dude. Like, anyone who knows anything about models, rule number one, forever and always, garbage in, garbage out.
That's right.
If you don't
That's
have
exactly
the
the
right,
reason I started this podcast, because people think that AI is the be all end all, and it is not.
yeah, it's just like, come on, people. Like, if you put crappy fuel into any engine, it's going to be terrible. So, if you really want an AI to give you any kind of answers that you can trust, the data's got to be perfect. The rules have to be perfect. And how can you do that on a large body of information or a large part of society? We can't even do it with all the computing power in the world for weather. We can't predict that, right? So why are we going to be able to predict much anything else? And so predicting stock prices is extremely hard to do. Very few people in the history of the world have ever outperformed the S&P 500 for any significant amount of time. We're doing that. And it's because we decided to take a smaller domain and bring experts to collecting the data, organizing the data, putting it into an ontology that produces signals that we know people can trust. And so that's what it's about. That's how we've done it, and it's all about. That's what separates us, is that we've taken the approach that the data matters most.
Mm-hmm.
We started with that, and we just built and we built and we built, and we had a belief that if we did it well enough, we would produce results that outperformed. In the beginning, we didn't know; it had never been done before.
Right.
We had a theory, and it's taken us 15, 20 years to get that theory, to execute on that theory and to get it proven. And now that it's proven, well, what do we have? We have the ultimate data set and system, small language model, to power an AI for investing.
Let's dig into that a little bit. I mean, you leverage natural language processing to analyze SEC filings. How do you train the models to parse MD&A, footnotes, legalese, and extract meaningful signals from the data?
We did it by first understanding what meaningful signals are. That's the ontology. Like, what are you trying to get to? For us, from a fundamental perspective, it's like, well, is this company more profitable than the market thinks or not? Are this company's profits higher or lower than what the market expects them to be? Because that's ultimately how you invest in a stock from a fundamental perspective. I believe that the company's profits are going to exceed what's embedded in the current stock price. That's a long position. I believe the company's profits are going to meaningfully fall short of what's embedded in the company's stock price. That's a sell or a short. And so backing down from that, we collect all the data we need to give us the best possible answer for profitability of the business. And we know enough, I had enough experience having done this work for years with Credit Suisse for all companies in all sectors around the world to know the tells for all sectors. Because my job when I first got there at Credit Suisse was to build this model. After I read the books twice that Michael Mauboussin told me to read, I then built a model that captured all of the accounting shenanigans. And then it was my job to convince analysts to use this model. Well, this is pre-tech bubble, tech bubble time. These analysts don't have small egos.
Right.
So if I went to those guys and said, hey, I got a better model, they're like, get out of my face. They call it rip your face off on Wall Street. Well, if I went in there and said I had a better model and I was wrong, I got my, all my skin ripped off. And so it was in my best interest to make sure I understood stuff. And so I studied and I studied and I studied and I only got my face ripped off once. But I learned where all the bodies were buried. I learned all the counting tricks. And I got really good at recognizing them quickly. And I also started to see that there were a limited number of words that were tells that were used to describe these accounting tricks. So when we started new constructs, I gave the system all those words. So one of the things that was built in was like, look, you cannot say you're finished analyzing this filing. If you're an analyst going through filing, you cannot say you're an analyst. You can't say you're finished going through this filing if these words exist and no data is collected. Mm-hmm. You have to go in and say, I saw this and I did not collect data because there's nothing there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I knew that if certain words existed, certain accounting anomalies existed, and we needed the data for that. And so that was how I sort of seeded the technology, the original technology, with a lot of intelligence. And then we also just made it way faster for people. The filing was in an electronic form, and we had all these tools to pull the data out and highlight all the stuff that was potentially of concern and break the filing into chunks so people could kind of knock through it faster. And then we created data checks to look at where data looked like it was collected funny from one filing to the next, or the model produced results that didn't make sense. And all this feeds into, a superior system. So one of the other things...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Carl, one of the other differentiators between us and the other data firms is that they don't produce models. So when they collect a data point that makes absolutely no friggin' sense, they got no idea. They're just collecting data, putting it in there. When you put your data into a financial model and you collect it in millions instead of billions, then all of a sudden your system's like, whoa, the revenue went up 200,000%. Is that right? No, those are easy things to know how to flag, but we got thousands of little tricks like that we've seen in going through and reviewing hundreds of thousands of filings that help us as well.
Well, what are your biggest data engineering challenges?
The size of the database and the speed. In fact, we've kind of got an architecture, candidly, that has a lot of room for improvement. And we're excited to be partnering with Google Cloud to help us with that. We're building an AI agent with them. And so we now have access to a lot of technology resources that are really going to meaningfully advance what it is we're doing. The cool thing about us, Carl, is that because the data and the tagging and all that we have is so strong, we don't need a lot of really fancy AI stuff to try and divine meaning out of crappy data. Our data is awesome. It's perfect. Like the only thing that messes us up is when companies use completely new terms to do things. And by the way, we've been through hundreds of thousands of filings, so we don't see that too often. And we know all the kind of words but it happens. And then when accounting rules change.
Yeah.
But fortunately, accounting rule changes. I worked for FASB for 5 years. I was a volunteer on their investor advisory committee. I helped them rewrite a bunch of rules to be better for investors. But the thing about FASB is they telegraph changes in accounting rules along, and so we're ready for it when it happens, and we know it's coming.
Okay. Well, how do you balance automation versus manual review in your pipeline? I know there's human in the loop aspects to this. So how do you do that balance?
That's a great question. So the goal has always been to get the machines to do as much as possible. So early on with keystrokes, you could very quickly select a line item in an income statement, and then it would jump to the next closest number and select that. And with another keystroke, you select and you put it into the database. And very quickly, because the database bucket structure where the data was set up would resemble what the company's filing looked like, because we'd done a company like that before. Obviously, the first time through the filing, it's a little harder, but over time, it gets easier and easier. We set all that kind of stuff up, and we do all these kinds of things to get the machine to remember what was done in the past, and the machine remembers how everything was parsed and treated in the past. And so we have now, we didn't have in the beginning, an auto parser that goes through and takes all the low-hanging fruit, just collects all the stuff so the human doesn't have to do anything. And the only thing that gets served up to the human now is exceptions. So where can the machine auto parser not figure out what this data point means? So over time, that was always the goal. And even in that original construct I told you, where you could use keystrokes to go through an income statement, now I don't think they look at income statements much at all anymore because the system gets it all. But even then, it's always about making it easier for the human to do the rudimentary, boring things, because our most precious asset is the intellect, the intelligence. And it atrophies really fast, Carl, when you make them do a lot of boring work. And New Constructs has always been different from our competitors in that our competitors, not only are they not building models, so they don't know what the data means and they collect it, and they don't know when they have errors because they never model it in any way. Mm-hmm. But they have a different kind of underlying business model that they hire thousands of people in an offshore location to do the data that humans in America don't want to do. And I said, that's a bad model. I'm going to build a machine so I can have a small group of really smart humans doing this work. I'm not going to try to just pound it out in a salt mine with a lot of people. You know what I mean? I'm going to get a few smart people to use really smart tools. I'm going to have really smart technology people to make the tools smarter and smarter all the time as well. And put that together, and then get the tech and the data people to work together to make the system parse more and more and more and more, so that with the same number of people, I should say with a third of the number of people that we had when we started, we cover 10 or 20 times more companies, and we do it 20 times faster. We used to have weeks of backlog where so many filings would come in we couldn't get through it all. Now we have none, because the machine is doing as much as it can, and then it only serves up to the humans what the machine doesn't understand. And then the human goes in, gives it the answer, and the machine remembers, oh, if this scenario ever happens again, I have the answer. So we're constantly whittling down the amount that the machine has to do, and that's always been the goal. That's helped me attract and retain a lot of smart people, because they know, well, I need to do this work a few times, learn how, what goes on in a filing, right? And that's kind of the part of the benefit of working in New Constructs. You learn how to read a filing like Warren Buffett. The good news is it's not going to take you 50 years to go through 100,000 filings. You can do it in a couple. And so, yeah, that's always been the model, is to bring experts in to make the machine do as much as possible and get those experts to help teach the machine. And that's how we sort of manage the human versus machine part of it.
Got it. Well, you already talked about the next, kind of alluded to this in this next question in your discussion about the partnership with Google, but what trade-offs have you made for scale, performance, or interpretability in your system?
Yeah, I mean, the trade-off has really been for us has been funding, capital. I chose to start this business with friends and family, and part of that was because we were promised a lot of capital from our beta customers. My first big client at Credit Suisse was Fidelity, and they promised to pay Credit Suisse several $1 million, $7 or $8 million in hard dollars. This is in 1998. If we could ever deliver on the product that I was sort of building at Credit Suisse, and it was mostly conceptual. And we had a lot of models in Excel. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a database or anything, because the tech folks at Credit Suisse couldn't do it. Anybody who knows anything about the technology at sell side Wall Street firms knows that, won't be surprised by that. Man, I think I had more skills from my basic programming class in 5th grade than some of the skills I saw at Credit Suisse back in 1998. It was really scary. But that's what I was faced with. And so that's part of the reason I left the project and did other things. But nevertheless, before I did that, I proved the concept. Fidelity said they wanted to pay several $1 million. So when Credit Suisse gave up on trying to execute on my project and bought Holt Value Associates, I thought, well, there's an opportunity here, because Holt uses CompuStat, and CompuStat data is terrible, like really bad quality. And we were successful when I was at Credit Suisse competing against Holt primarily and entirely because we were all about getting better data from the footnotes and collecting it by hand. So when I decided to break out on my own, leave Credit Suisse, and build my own automation, I went to my big clients like Fidelity and Janus and TIAA-CREF and said, hey, I'm building this. You guys want it? They said, yes. Well, by the time we built it and launched in 2004, they're already like people are already like giving up on fundamentals. It's all about other stuff. So I never got that capital. And so I was really forced to do this with very little capital. So that's meant our trade-off has been speed and scale. We still do what we do extremely well. We cover all the companies in the United States. We cover another 1,000 ETFs and 7,000 or 8,000 mutual funds, but we haven't scaled globally. And it's not because we don't have the ability, we just don't have the capital to really go out and spend on that. We've been very focused on doing exactly what we do that no one else can do. And it was kind of funny in one of our first meetings with Google Cloud, I mentioned that, and they're like, oh, you did the right thing because we got all that other stuff. We got the AIP, we got the programmers, we got the scale, we got the computing power. We've got all these systems. You did the right thing. You got that special ingredient. We can do all that. And I thought to myself, okay, great. That's good. That's worked out well. So that's really, those have been the only trade-offs. Certain places we have not compromised, Carl. We would never compromise because it would ruin everything, is in the data quality, innovating and collaborating, getting smarter and doing right by our customers, providing the best data in the world. And it's attention and an unwavering dedication to that by the team, an amazing team that I've had that has truly, truly been uncompromising about those kinds of goals. That's what has allowed us to create a data set that can, drive indices and an ETF that dramatically outperforms the S&P 500.
Well, one dimension I think is compelling is trust, not just for users of your research, but trust internally in your models, in your team, in how you scale. That tension between model confidence and humility is something many AI first firms wrestle with. How do you build and protect trust with users who rely on your ratings and outputs?
I love that this is a key topic for you, Carl, because I think trust is one of the most important things we have in society. It's the tie that binds us most important. And it's a key part of my analyst training program. We have a whole section on the importance of trust, how the decline in trust is hurting America, hurting the world, how it costs us more, and just in terms of raw wasted expense to compensate for lack of trust. We're the most litigious society in the world. Any business arrangement requires all kinds of documentation and agreements. That's just lawyers. Pure transaction cost in the way in so many ways. We have one of the most incarcerated populations in the world. Again, lack of trust in people. We got to put them behind bars. It's all costs on society that hurt us. And so New Constructs was always built to improve trust in the capital markets. That's how we improve the efficiency. And so our system is 100% transparent and auditable from the beginning. I've always said, I will show you how we do the calculations and I'll show you where we get the data. And it's that kind of dedication. It's one of our core values, 100% transparency, is why people trust us. It's why Harvard Business School professors did a deep dive study and published a paper proving that our data is superior to every other data set out there and that the market is missing footnotes. It's why Ernst & Young, consultants and auditors, published a paper proving that our models are superior to Bloomberg and Capital IQ models. It's why Harvard Business School professors, another set of Harvard Business School professors, wrote a paper proving that our stock ratings outperform human analyst ratings. We are able to do these things and get prestigious people to put their name on it and say it's true because they can audit it back to the source.
Well, and by doing it that way, you eliminate the black box model.
1,000%. Never been a fan of the black box. Like, I don't believe that it'll work in the investing business, right? Because what investor is going to say, oh, I'm just going to trust your black box? What professional investor? That's our focus, institutional investors. They can't do that because then they're outsourcing the work they're supposed to be doing to someone else, and then nobody needs them. Right? Nobody needs to pay a portfolio manager to invest based on a black box, right? So you're going to have to give them your black box. So your black box won't ever stay black, which means you give away your secret.
That's right.
I've always said, it's not about the models. It's about the data. Right. And what I'm doing is not secret. It's just that I'm able to do what everyone else is doing with a spoon, I can do with a bulldozer. And that's the key to provoke. A lot of people can go and they can read a filing, they can build a model. But shoot, it's going to take them probably 8 hours for just one filing. And you want to probably have 5 years of data. That's 20 filings, right? 3 Qs and a K every year. So what, 20 filings, 160 hours? Then you got to have a model. You got to build the kind of model that puts all that data in the right place. All right. And now you've done it for one company. All right. Oh, maybe it's a good stock or best. How do you know if you don't compare it to all other companies? And that's the magic that New Constructs has done that work on so many companies with so much detail and precision. And then being able to scale that, that's the really special thing that we've done. And when we scale it, now that we can go in and say, oh, we're going to create this core earnings leaders index. We're going to identify the companies whose earnings are most understated compared to what the market thinks. And we can only know what's most understated because we've done the diligence on all the companies. It helps us on the short side too. Like we have a most dangerous stocks list. We have a zombie stock list. We can find the worst of the worst in the entire market because we've done the diligence at scale. And that's really something special that no one else has ever done.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, when you scale coverage or automate, how do you guard against errors, overconfidence, or even model shift?
First of all, we don't rely on models to do a bunch of stuff blindly for us, right? All of our models are based on precisely and intentionally written deterministic rules based on real data. So we don't need to worry about like model shift, like the model starts doing stuff we don't know about. No, the models only do what we tell them to do. That's a difference in part of what we do. And part of when we scale, we are able to look at this company over time and make sure that like data doesn't change too abnormally. We make sure that if they have certain accounting, if certain words appear that are red flags, like I've said that rule from the beginning that look, if certain red flags exist and we don't collect data, then you got to have a human going to make sure. Or we can trust the machine to look enough to know that the data related to that red flag either doesn't exist for that period or doesn't exist at all. Because a lot of times in filings, you get a lot of repetition because they talk about prior period stuff. So red flags in one period can bleed into other periods, even if the data is not there. We've got thousands of what we call data checks that crawl through the filings. We've got hundreds of thousands of filings that we've checked before that we can check against to make sure things are done right. And ultimately, anytime the machine's not 100% sure, we get a human to check. Do we make errors every now and then? Yes, we do. We have mistakes. It's rare. I think it's very rare, but we do our best. And because, all our clients from the beginning, Carl, have big institutional portfolio managers and they're checking the data. They're looking closely and we know what we're up against. And by the way, you make many mistakes with an institutional client, then you're fired. They don't have time to use data they can't trust.
Right. That's right. Well, you guys have been around for a long time. So are there any internal frictions that you still see between maybe research, tech, sales, operations as you've grown?
No, I mean, I think the biggest challenge for us over the years has really been revenue and getting more people at scale to buy into this. Part of the wow effect of this Google Cloud partnership for us as a firm has been to experience what it's like to work with a tech company as opposed to a financial company. And in retrospect, I can tell you, Carl, I think maybe I was wasting my time all these years because they are, at the end of the day, with financial sector companies, because they're conflicted. They don't want what New Constructs is doing to come out. They don't want it to be adopted at scale. Because once people start looking through the New Constructs lens at companies and they realize, oh, this is great. It's all done for me. It's correct. And it produces signals that outperform. That's great for all the companies that look cheap. But what about all those companies that don't? How about all those IPOs that are junk? All of a sudden, if this gets out at scale, Wall Street loses the golden goose. It can't sell a lot of IPOs. I mean, we were among the very first to raise our hand and say, whatever you do, don't invest in this piece of junk. It's documented. Look up the most ridiculous IPO of 2019. New Constructs will come up all over the place. We called it out when it was valued at $47 billion. It ended up going bankrupt, right? It was never a good stock. But Wall Street can put that stuff out there and sell it. Same with Beyond Meat, Open Door, a bunch of junk stocks. And they can see stocks go to the moon for no reason. Because guess what? Nobody's ever really grounded the analysis in those stocks in real fundamental reality. If they do at scale, Wall Street can't sell that stuff. The IPO business goes to a fraction of what it is today. Mm-hmm. That's going to cost them billions. And think about today, like how silly it is that the stock market is in vogue, fashionable thing. Everybody talking about the stock market. We had TV shows. When my grandfather was in the business 50, 60 years ago, He had to open the Wall Street Journal every day to find out what stock prices closed at the day before.
Yeah.
Right? That's what investing should be. It should not be a game. It shouldn't be gamified on Robinhood. It shouldn't be something people pay attention to every day. Businesses don't change every day. Stocks shouldn't be traded every day. But it's become a game, a very, very profitable game for Wall Street. And what New Constructs does is kind of pull the curtain back on that. Like, hey, y'all, you're all getting played. You're all getting played. Now, some of you are getting lucky making some money. And as long as markets go up, maybe everybody makes money. But Wall Street's making way more than everyone else. When Robinhood is sending your trade intentions off to hedge funds so they can front run you at scale, when Schwab is doing that, when everyone's doing that, you are a pawn, not a player. The old saying, if the product is free, then you're the product. That's how Robinhood offers free trades. That's how Schwab offers free trades. That's how everybody offers free trades, because they're selling that stuff. They want you on there. They want you in there churning it up, because they take advantage of it left and right. That's why New Constructs has not been widely adopted. I've been in to see some of the most senior people in the largest organizations in the country. Now, quant funds like it. And guess what quant funds tell us, Carl? If you tell anybody we're a client, we'll fire you. They want it to be a secret too for them. But in general, yeah, that's been our biggest challenge, Carl. Nothing else has been that much of a challenge. It's really been widespread adoption, because if Wall Street lets this cat out of the bag, they can't put it back. Because you can't be like, oh, this is a great way to analyze stocks. We think this is great. This is more rigorous. This is better. But for this IPO over here, which looks really bad, we're going to ask you to do it in a different way. We're going to come up with a community adjusted EBITDA, like they did with WeWork, right? Or all these adjusted EBITDA measures they do for all these IPOs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're making up a new metric for you to measure profitability. When the truth is, there should be one version of truth around profitability,
right,
and valuation. And that's what New Constructs brings. Once that one version of the truth is largely adopted and known at scale, all the other BS gets washed away. And if Wall Street doesn't have BS, it loses a lot of money.
Right, right. Well, how has regulatory pressure, accounting rules changes, or audit scrutiny impacted New Constructs? I used to be a CIO at a brokerage firm here in Birmingham, Alabama years ago, and that was always a challenge. So how has that impacted you guys, or has it?
I didn't realize you're in Birmingham. I love Birmingham. Accounting rules changes affect us a whole lot. You know, it changes the disclosure. The machines have to be retuned and taught what to collect, a bunch of new data points. And, you know, we did a bunch of work on that related to off-balance sheet debt, in particular operating leases. And then we had to figure out that companies were creating new ways of hiding debt off balance sheet in the form of not yet commenced and variable leases. So that creates work. The regulatory framework otherwise doesn't affect us that much. It's really when, you know, they can talk about all that stuff that they want. If it doesn't change the way disclosures are presented in filings, kind of don't care.
Gotcha. Well, companies in finance that can scale trusted automation, you know, especially in valuation and transparency, are rare. The future likely rewards those who can combine domain trust and with a scalable infrastructure. You're sitting at the frontier of that. Where do you see New Constructs in 3 to 5 years? Broader coverage, embedded models with brokers and advisors, APIs, new verticals? What's your moonshot look like?
Yeah, all of that, Carl. I think what we have at New Constructs is a very unique ability to create signal from unstructured data. And by the way, that's probably the most important single thing for AI. And here's my proof. We've spent, the world, these big, huge tech companies spent billions on billions on all this AI infrastructure. And what do we get? ChatGPT can't really even tell us, you know, much more than a secretary or a junior analyst. We need the data. We need the data sets. We need the small language models. That's what's going to make AI really work. That's the idea behind an agent. An AI agent, I think, to me, is just another way of saying small language model. I'm going to get my AI to not pretend to do everything. Generative AI, whatever, joke. But an agent is going to focus on a very narrow domain. It's going to be an expert in it and have human level subject matter expertise to provide human level expert advice, recommendations, decisions. And that's the future. And we're really good at that. And we want to do that we've done it for the investing world. We want to do it for other parts of the world. Love to do it for, how about the political world, voting, where we build profiles on candidates that take into account where the money comes from, how that aligns with their track record, how that aligns with their stated platform.
Oh, that would really make you popular.
Yeah, and they give them an integrity score. How these things align, and candidates where all three align, that's a good thing. And that's a data-driven answer on how to understand truth in a world that needs more truth. And so I'm attracted to the places where the dark corners are the darkest and the largest. Healthcare is another place. There's a lot of places where there's a lot of healthcare data that's yet to really been able to provide the value, create the value that it ought to create. I think that our ETFs will probably be, our family of ETFs will grow and will be probably the passive indexes of choice, because they'll be based on investing in the cheapest and the best companies, which is really where capital ought to go. I think we will be the source of fundamental data for all sophisticated investors, all investors for that matter. And I think that we'll also be the driver of the AI for investing. We're building that now with Google, and that's where the future gets very interesting, because our AI right now is going to start and focus on fundamentals, but we want to bring in technical. We want to bring in sentiment. We want to bring in insider trading. Bring all those models to bear for something that can give answers, and develop backtests that prove it gives answers, that in many ways ultimately takes a lot of the fluff out of the market, Carl. I don't believe that we should have day traders. I don't think it's good for the markets. It's just churn. Again, companies don't change that often, so investment shouldn't change that often. And so ultimately, I think I want to make the market boring again. I want it to go back to having a few people that care about their clients, are going to do hard work. And you know what? They look at the paper every morning to see where the stock prices are. We don't need all this short-termism affecting how we allocate capital. And capital markets go back to the back pages. They go to the back burner in society, and maybe we get focused on something else that's exciting. Maybe it's just plain betting on sports. I don't know. People need to gamble. They need to gamble. I get it. Maybe there's always a corner of the market that's going to do that. But ultimately, we're better off if we got people acting like good stewards of capital and understanding how that takes time. That's what we want in our capital markets. That's what I want to support. That's what I want to help new constructs bring about, because that's how we best improve the integrity of the capital markets.
Well, you mentioned generative AI a second ago. What emerging technologies excite you, or do you see that may pose a new threat to new constructs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest threat for us is somebody getting our source data, right? All those connections and tagging that we've done in the filings, because I think that one of the things people don't realize is that the AI is not going to get smart on its own. We are not yet at a place where AI can figure anything out that a human hasn't figured out already, right? They need the human to figure out the problem, right? They need the human to say, oh, this footnote means this, and this is how you have to build a complex financial model to make sense of it. Now, I don't think they can reverse engineer all that back from just the results that we put out there. I think that's the really hard thing to do. And I think that machines may eventually get to a place where they can do some of that, but it will only be after they've learned it from a human to begin with. So what I'm saying here is that I don't really have any fear about any particular technology at this point in time. But I do know that when what we have becomes widespread and everybody has it, and it's out there, the machines will see how we've done it. And they will use how we did it manually to figure out how to do that for other things. And it's reverse engineering. It's like, okay, what does the ontology need to be? What is the signal I'm looking for? What data points do I need to determine that signal, to derive that signal? What does the data look like that gives me that data? What does the unstructured data look like that gives me these data points and these signals? And then how do I connect that stuff? That's what the machines eventually got to do. That's our secret sauce. Right now, there's a big difference between me saying this out loud and people being able to do it, because it's a whole lot easier to say than it is to do. Kind of like Tom Brady saying, here's how you throw a touchdown pass. Just check out my video, and having somebody step in and do it. But eventually, right, in the same way we might have robots playing football because they're better, eventually machines will be able to do what we do, I believe, but it's going to take a long time, and they're going to need examples like us having actually done it to be what trains them to do it on their own at some point. That's my thinking.
Makes perfect sense. Well, you can't really have a conversation like this or a discussion like this unless you bring in the environmental, social, governance standards, regulatory standards as it relates to all this. As all those things converge, how do you see, or do you see that reshaping your research model or how you do things at New Constructs?
Repeat the question, please.
So how might regulatory, environmental, social, or
Oh,
governance standards, or even accounting convergence reshape your research model, or how
yeah.
you do things at new
I don't
companies?
think it's going to. I think one of the knocks against us early on from institutional investors was, oh, yeah, the government's going to take you over. And I don't know. I think that maybe what we want to see is more of a migration away from entirely relying on the government to perform necessary services like the SEC. And like, I know they're not checking filings, Carl. I've actually submitted reports to the SEC and the Senate Banking Committee on how income statements don't add up, balance sheets don't balance beyond rounding errors, right? These are like significant misstatements, entire required disclosures just not in the filing. Nobody's looking. And I think there's an opportunity for the private sector to stand up and deliver and step in for the government in a lot of areas. The last few months, we've heard about how the job market data is so poor, not
Mhm.
help, not good, right? We need to not just say, oh, we're just going to give the government to do it. And oh, yeah, we know there's all that bureaucracy and we know all these cuts need to be made, but that's somebody else's problem. I'm saying it's my problem. I want to stand up and try to do something about it. ESG has mostly been a joke, Carl. If you ask anybody who knows the business well, most of the ESG data providers will admit to you behind closed doors their data is a joke. Nobody discloses anything. I shouldn't say nobody. Very, very, very few firms disclose anything in any kind of consistently standard way for anyone to build any consistent, scalable ESG framework that's based on real data. The institutions that use it, they are blindly just taking the data from one of these big data firms. I don't want to mention any names because these people at those firms have told me their data is a joke. And but the big institutions will take it and they can check the box, say, oh, we've got the data. We've done the ESG thing. I think ESG is going to evolve. There's one company out there doing some cool stuff right now called Just Capital. They're collecting their own data. They're doing employee surveys. They're doing vendor surveys. I think that's the real place where we're going to get some real sense of what ESG means, and get some real meaning around that. That's not just some false data feed. But I do think the most important part of ESG is the G. And governance to me in the capital markets anyway is mostly about stewardship of investor capital. And that's what governance is. What kind of governance and controls do I have in place to ensure that I am being a good steward of my investor capital? And I think at New Constructs, we have the best possible measures of the quality of stewardship in terms of the profitability of the business. How much capital has this company been given, and what kind of return are they earning on that? And that's what I've said to all my friends and colleagues in academia and ESG. I'm like, listen, the most important number in ESG is return on invested capital, because that's what tells you how well they're doing at G. However good they might be doing environmentally and socially, if the business is not making a real return on capital, it's not sustainable. So whatever good they might be doing for the E&S, irrelevant because the business can't stick around. So let's focus on the G and let's focus on the ROIC part of the G, or return on invested capital, and that's the start. And from there, we can do these other things. But that's the start. And otherwise, I think ESG's got a lot of room to grow.
Gotcha. Well, this is a fun question. So if you had all the capital you need, what would be that bold moonshot idea that you would like to pursue? Would it be expanding globally? Would it be other verticals? Would it be different industries altogether?
Expanding global, and we don't need a lot to do that because the automation, that's part of the reason why we've sort of waited on that, is waited on global expansions. We wanted our automation to get to the point where we could do it with maybe half a dozen or a dozen people and have it all done in like 6 to 12 months at most, right? That's adding 10,000 companies to coverage with 10 years of history, right, around the world. Uh, Otherwise for Moonshot, I think we just execute on what it is we're doing. Give myself a moonshot bonus. Haven't had one of those in a while. And some of our team, because we've been really working really hard for a long time, and we've done it, I think, at a modest pay, especially compared to what I used to make on Wall Street. Otherwise, I think the partnership with Google is awesome because there's a lot of resources to build an AI agent for investing, which I think is going to be awesome. And I think that's going to be able to replace so much of everything that's out there right now. One version of the truth in one place, auditable, back to the source, no black box, proven alpha, like it's kind of the best of all worlds.
Mhm.
Maybe we do what we do, and I told you about politics. I think there's opportunity in a lot of survey data and data collected around hospital visits and hospital stay to help with healthcare and outcomes. I'd love to dig into a lot of other verticals. Those are the top ones right now, and I haven't had a lot of time to daydream about that kind of stuff, Carl. But when I do, we will, because I think what we're doing, as I mentioned before, is absolutely important to the evolution of AI. You have to get the agents empowered with real subject matter experts first. That means you got to get the data right, the rules right, the ontology right. We got to get good at that. Once we have enough agents out there, we can stack up and do a lot of cool stuff. And I think that's the way of the world, and that's what I want to be a leader in bringing to the world, so that we know that the AI can be truly trusted.
The comment you made, or the thought behind moving into politics and kind of doing some of the work there with the integrity score and that kind of thing. I've never heard. I've talked to a lot of people, around the healthcare industry and all that, but never anyone that thought about that. I've never really talked to anyone about that integrity score or something like that as it relates to politics. That's a great idea.
Thank you. Thank you. I've had it for a long time. It's just, I got to get new constructs going.
There you go. There you go. Well, David, this has been a deeply illuminating conversation. Your commitment to transparency, rigor, and combining domain insight with automation is inspiring. For those listeners who care about not just data, but trustworthy data, New Constructs is raising the bar. You can learn more at newconstructs.com or connect with David on LinkedIn. If you're thinking about how to build AI systems you can trust, ones that combine domain rigor, auditability, governance, and scalability, that's exactly the space where we help at Prtelligent. Let's talk. Until next time, ask better questions, build smarter systems, and stay on the edge of intelligence. Thank you, David.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Carl. I appreciate it.
Yeah.